Why the change in the art style from what we saw in the last three Prince of Persia games?
Sure. It's kind of a multi-part answer, but I'll try and bring it down really quickly. I mean, first of all, we want to be unique, right? Like, we want to stand out from our competition. We want to have something where people look at it and they say immediately, that's Prince of Persia. And, you know, I think we can say we've succeeded there. You see a screenshot of this game in action, particularly if you see a clip of it in action, and you know that it's Prince of Persia. And so that's really good for us because it gives us that sort of unique visual identity. Second of all, we've got a fantasy game. It's a fantasy world. There's fantasy creatures. There's magical powers. It's a fantasy storyline. So we didn't want to try and kind of shoehorn that into a realistic look and feel. It didn't feel like they gelled very well. Whereas having a more stylized artistic direction seemed to dovetail very nicely with the fact that we had a fantasy universe. And then finally, our illustrations, the concept art that's done on Prince of Persia has always been just really something that the fans got into. Whenever we would release one or two of these illustrations, they would just go crazy. So our artistic director this time around just said, you know what, let's try and develop the tools and technology to make the game look like those illustrations rather than just having those illustrations as inspiration for the artists. So thus was born the illustrative artistic direction and really the intention of making a game where it feels like you're playing a painting, you're playing one of these amazing concept arts.
Right, and what Tomas is showing right now is the fact that you can actually go a lot of different ways, correct, to get to the next part of the game.
Yeah, exactly. So looking in the background, Tom, I'll just kind of show them the windmills there a little bit. Okay, so those windmills, that's a destination. Like, that's a part of the game that you can get to. Obviously, everything you can see, you can reach. And there are a bunch of ways you could get there. You could obviously go down this path that Tomas is just looking at with those sequences of beams and columns. If you turn around, Tomas, and go back the other way, we could go along this other way here, backwards. We could go back the way we just came and wrap around a completely other direction. We could go along this way. There's a series of poles and columns, etc. You know, you really, as the player, have a choice this time around in Prince of Persia. How do you want to navigate through the world? And of course, depending on how the choices that you take, do I go left, do I go right, do I go back, etc., that's going to then translate into gameplay differences, and that's also going to translate into story differences, so that you and I, when we are comparing the game at 6 hours through, won't have had exactly the same experience, and therefore hopefully it'll encourage replayability and discussion and all sorts of cool stuff.
Cool. And then one of the other big changes is for the last three Prince of Persia games, you guys were kind of throwing a lot of enemies at the prince at once. This game is all one-on-one combat, or I guess you could call it one-on-two with Elika.
Yeah, 2-on-1, yeah.
Why did you decide to do that?
God, again, multi-part answer. One big part was there was a lot of competition in the many-on-one area in the action-adventure genre. I mean, I don't have to list all the games that went down that route, but there's a lot of them, and they do it well. But it was another area where we weren't really going to be able to kind of stand out as unique, which we really wanted to do. So one reason for doing it was just because we wanted to make sure that our combat system was unique, it was ours, and that other people looked at that and said, hey, you know what, maybe we can draw inspiration from that. Another reason is because it fits very well with the type of character we're creating here. This is not your Kratos who's going to just slaughter through thousands of enemies and then flex at the end of it. I mean, this guy is a sort of shades of gray type character. He's fallible. He's got his his strong points and his weak points, etc. And we want him to be more human. And so it kind of makes sense that in combat he's not slaughtering hordes. He's fighting individuals, if you will. And then finally, we really like that sense of urgency that comes from a fight feeling like a boss battle, whether it is a boss like this character happens to be, or a more generic enemy. We want those close camera cuts, those dramatic moments that really make you feel that sense of danger, that sense of urgency, so that when you overcome that challenge, you pat yourself on the back and you feel good about it. We want to take the sensation of slaughtering hordes and all of that drama and all of that feeling of accomplishment and distill it into its essence and make sure you get that feeling in every single one-on-one fight or two-on-one fight in the game.